just so that we're not strictly worse than status quo. But I'm not in this to be not worse than status quo. I'm in this to be dramatically better than status quo, and I assume all of you are too, because you're all doing a lot of really hard work. And so I think all those things do need to get solved, but where I'm most excited about is this idea that I'm using lots of different services and tools, and they each know things about me and have great services, and if I can link them together in this ongoing way where there's trusted communication channels and data are flowing, my God, that should be so much more powerful and so much more user-friendly and so much more connected than this world today where every single website thinks you've never used another website before in your life, right? But again, where is the virtuous cycle? I mean, those of you who have seen me talk have probably seen this slide now for 2 years or more, where we have this idea that wouldn't it be cool if I would see John shared something and it's in the Flaxo Pulse stream, and I can just click through and it's a slide I'd never heard before, and I show up and I've got my profile and I've got my email address and I can see which of my friends are already on this site, and I can just start integrating, and as more friends join, it just sort of works. And if I share activity out, it flows back into the aggregator and other people see it, and there's this wonderful virtuous cycle that drives traffic to the site and drives content back to the aggregators, and everybody's better for it. Well, I don't think I can point to a single example of this in the field right now that really is humming and really is working. And it's hard because there's a bunch of different pieces that all have to get put together to really make this rock, right? You have to have players that are serving multiple roles. Clearly Facebook Connect is also trying to achieve this, but I think it's open for the entire industry to really nail the details down about when and how each of the steps gets hooked up and where the information flows and how much you're asking users for permission, how much you're doing automatically, and so forth. But this is the kind of thing that I think if we could get it right and we could point to examples, people would be like, oh my God, I got to get on that magic carousel. It's like, this is going to be the new way that I make my business successful. One example of this that came to mind recently, just as a personal example and to add a little context, is Flaxo is not an OpenID party, OpenID provider, and the New York Times is not an OpenID relying party, but we did this really cool integration recently where New York Times has this system called Times People, where you can create an account on the New York Times, and then you can recommend stories you think are interesting, and rather than it being dig this or Facebook this or whatever, it's actually like recommending it within the New York Times. You've got an account, and you can create friends, and you can see what stories they think are interesting and so forth. But you can also, they have an API for it, so you can get your feed of recommended stories and pull it out and share it into Flaxo. And so without the New York Times having to put any Flaxo UI on their site, you could get these really nice, richly shared time stories going out into your aggregator, and I can share them to as many aggregators as I want. And so it's really cool because it's a very mainstream site. It's UI I'm already used to using on New York Times. But think what happens today when somebody sees this and they're like, oh, that's cool. I read the Times. I want to do that, right? So you click over, and then you have to go find the sign-up page. You have to fill out all your information from scratch again. You have to go to your spam folder and find that validation email and click on it. You then have to come back to Flaxo, go edit your profile settings, find the hook up a feed, find the New York Times feed. We have about 70. Put in that same email address you used, right? It's anything but a virtuous cycle. And there's no reason imagine if Flaxo were an LP, a hybrid LP, and when you clicked over to the New York Times, we basically gave you a payload that's like, hey, here's this user, and here's their email address, and it's already validated, and here's their address book, and by the way, here's an API call to hook up a feed for them. I could just go over and start sharing feeds, and it would just come back, right? And it would just work. And that would be a lot better, I think, for both Flaxo and the New York Times, because they both get a lot more people sharing and engaging stuff. So I think, I don't know if it's this specific pair that's going to crack the nut, but anytime you have this potentially symbiotic relationship between content sharing sites that want to be more social and social sites that want to have better content, we should be able to make this rock. And I think that's something we need to figure out together. So I guess to sum this up, my feeling is we've still got a lot of work to do, and this is no time to be slowing down or resting on our laurels or patting ourselves on our backs or talking about what incremental improvements we can make in Q3 of next year. I think we've got to really feel like we're still in a situation where our default path is to die and never be relevant. And we have to challenge ourselves to break out of that by getting together and working on these problems and showing progress and being bold. And I'm not saying this to be depressing. You know that I'm the biggest fanboy of all of these open technologies of anywhere in Silicon Valley. But I'm saying it because this is the group that's going to make it happen. And I wanted to leave you on maybe a slightly more inspiring note, which is I'm not telling you this because I resign and I'm not going to work on this anymore. I'm telling you this because I still feel like we can make this happen if we just kind of recommit to ourselves that it's important to make it happen and that we all have the right pieces to make it happen if we can just come together and work. And it's fitting, I think, that we're starting IIW week. I think the most inspirational thing that's happened to me in the last year was last year's IIW, where this was at the party, like the second night of IIW, and it's a little bit fuzzy picture, but John snapped this. It's me with people from Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and others, and those of you here in the audience who were there, we ended up staying at this thing till like midnight, and we were just talking back and forth, and all of a sudden, all these bells started going off in our heads about ways to link OpenID together and OAuth, and how the things fit together, and how they make it simpler, and how you deal with the desktop. And it's like my head was just buzzing, and after all of that, we sort of actually cracked a lot of these nuts and came up with really genuinely new insights that simplified the problems. And we went back and all got really excited and tried to write it all down before we forgot it, and then we went and built it. And that's what started this whole year with the 92% and all that great stuff we had. I mean, it was this sort of thing. So there's no magic out there. Like, we can do that again. We have to figure out what are those problems are we going to have that same conversation about this time at IIW. It's going to give that next level, of OpenID success, because we can do this. I don't think any of those problems are fundamentally unsolvable, but they're not going to solve themselves either. And the rest of the industry is not standing still. So, I'm still with it. I still want to make it happen, and I hope you are too. And if so, I just say, let's get to work, because this really should be awesome. Thanks.